him back to life.
You know, people sit out on the front porch hoping people will come by.
Go forth and do good.
It's insane. I have the most understanding wife in the world.
I treat everybody the same thing.
Oh, that's the other thing I love about Marietta. It's like a melting pot.
You are listening to Marietta Stories. Each week, veteran podcaster Bill Nowicki brings you the heartwarming, interesting, and fun stories from the people that make the community of Marietta, Georgia, a place to call home. Here's your host, Bill Nowicki.
The Georgia Symphony Orchestra has been around a long time, but Taylor Rambo has not been around all that long. He's really young, along with some of the other people that we're going to highlight on Season 6 of Marietta Stories. Taylor has a very interesting story. He found a through line in his life where he took classes that supported his passion, and now he brings that passion to Marietta, and I'm super excited to bring you his story. And you can learn more about the Georgia Symphony and all the great things they're trying to do. They're trying to become number one in the country when it comes to youth orchestras. All right, I have Taylor Rambo, the executive director of Georgia Symphony. And he's only been in the job this month, right?
Just a few weeks, yeah. I've been with the organization most of the year so far in a consulting role, and then they decided to keep me on as the new executive director.
Wow, I can't wait to hear your story. You are a Marietta native, though. The Rambo name is known throughout the city. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in music and then behind the scenes of music.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember being 7 years old at Hickory Hills Elementary, and my music teacher, Danny Eccles, was always playing the piano in our music classes. And once I expressed an interest in that, my parents said, well, we got to get him piano lessons. And what happened was that he offered to connect us with a piano teacher. Her name was Evelyn Green, and she no longer lives in the area, but she really helped me build my formative education as a musician. And it was so wonderful as well because I went to Marietta First United Methodist Church growing up, and I was in the children's choir, and then I was in the youth choir in high school and middle school and all those kinds of things. And just the rest of it took off from there. I mean, I was in band in middle and high school in the Marietta City school system as well. Just a little bit of everything. At one point, I said, gosh, I guess I do want to go get a degree in music and see where that takes me.
Well, I'm curious about that feeling you got because, you know, there's that transition where you're listening to music and then all of a sudden you're performing music and people are listening to you. What was that feeling like for you?
I don't know how to describe that exactly because it's been something I've done for so long, but I can tell you there is a difference for me between sitting in an ensemble and performing for folks or really performing with folks versus sitting in a theater and listening to other people perform. As a choral singer, when I was in choir, I would always feel like the entire front of my body was a big light that was just emanating sound. Because when you're singing and using your vocal cords and just working with others and collaborating, what you're making is just like a full and true expression of who you are. As a performer, there's just so much wonder and amazement and experience in that. As an adult, the way that I perform the most is I've been a musical theater accompanist, so playing the piano for singers singing musical theater tunes. For me, it's not so much being the person in front, but it's being part of the collaborative process. And I think that's probably what led me to arts administration and symphonies, because it's the same experience. You know, you are supporting the art. You get to be part of it without necessarily being the person who's the focus on stage.
Yeah. I see that. So the music degrees, talk about that, and then how you got into behind the scenes and what the shift was.
Sure. Well, so I went to the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami down in Florida, which was an incredibly interesting experience, totally different culture, weather, all those kinds of things. But
was that your first time out of Marietta for extended periods?
It was. And I have to tell you, my first whole year of college, I thought I was at summer camp. Like, I couldn't physically understand that I was somewhere else. And I think it was like the dorms and, like the linoleum floors and all those things like that. And I think it took about maybe to February or March to be like, yes, I should be studying really hard. This is school. It was a huge culture shift for me. But I got a degree in music business. And while I was studying that, the more and more that I saw was, I want to serve these other musicians. I want to work with folks, not so much that I wanted to make it rich in the recording industry or working for a record label or something.
But it sounds like you're like a connector. You like to connect people, musicians with the audience, musicians to potential money and actually make things happen. Was there anybody that you came across, you thought, man, this person is so talented, all they need is the right set of circumstances?
Absolutely. Actually, in between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, we had to buy recording equipment for college because we were going to take a class in learning how that all worked. And I found myself going to some of my friends who were amateur musicians and getting involved in some recording projects with them. And it was just the best way to learn on the job. Instead of sitting in the class and learning how the equipment worked, right. I got to work with my friends and make music with them. And I was really trying hard to work with them. There was one guy in particular, his name was Justin Smith, and he was an incredible guitarist. And he wasn't formally trained or anything like that, which blew my mind because as someone who had taken piano lessons for more than a decade.
And all that.
Yeah, exactly. I really wanted to see him and some of the other folks around that group succeed. And I know at least one of them is constantly performing in a band in Atlanta that also is selling out shows in Brooklyn here and there. So I know that at least one of those folks really made it where they wanted to go. But it was so cool to help them with technology they didn't have, with training they didn't have, and to try to leverage my skills to support them in their work.
Yeah, so it sounded like you kept doing that. You got some more degrees. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, so I got this music business degree, and I remember being like, well, what do I do with this? Knowing that I was shifting in my thinking. And actually, I had an internship with the Atlanta Baroque Orchestra while I was in college. And while I did that, it was my first indication that, nonprofit arts management, this is a thing. This is something that I could do. And it was really cool because Johannes Vermeer, who did The Girl with the Pearl Earring, that famous painting, his works were touring at the time. And so we got to play Baroque music at the High Museum of Art with Baroque era paintings around. And that was a really transformative experience for me, was encapsulating wow, these masterworks that we've seen forever and studied in art history, in high school or whatever. Also, here's the music in context with that. What does that look like? And
so you added another element to the visual and you made it auditory too. Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so anyways, that story is just to say that I was starting to pull in that direction. And so I found out at the University of Miami, they had an arts management degree, live entertainment management program at Frost School of Music. It was wonderful. In the first class that I had to take, it was about performing arts centers and venue management. And everything I learned in that class clicked. For the first time, it just fully clicked with me and sort of the way I move through the world. And
let me pause for a second because there's so many kids that go to college, don't know what they want to do. They take courses, they get a degree, and then they never use it or whatever. Here's somebody that actually took classes because you really had an interest in it. I thought that's really cool. And I bet your parents are pretty happy with that too.
Well, they were pretty concerned that I wanted to go to music school, but they encouraged me to get a music business degree because they knew that there would be something I'd learn in that process that would help me in the long run. And my parents are both excited that I've moved back to Marietta, but they're also really excited that I found a career that is in this field as well.
So you took the transformative class. What was that like? What was the class? What clicked for you? What kind of elements came together?
Sure. Well, one of the first things in that talking about performing arts centers, you also have to talk about what is a nonprofit, what is its mission, defining the parameters of how you describe the work you do as an organization. And missionally driven work was immediately something that connected with me. I've always been into service and how can we help other people. And so it just clicked. And not only that, but I learned about an industry association called APAP, which is a big industry association for the performing arts field, in that book, and proceeded to go and volunteer at the conference for that industry association in January, at the beginning of the next semester. Yeah. That led to an internship at that organization, which led to a job opportunity at that organization, which led me to permanently move to Washington, D.C. and pursue the beginnings of my arts management career. So not only did that class introduce nonprofit elements to me and what it takes to do behind the scenes to support the art, but then it also gave me an opportunity to leverage into a career pathway.
Right. So that's another thing I want to just pause. You volunteered to help out somewhere that gave you that experience, which is another. This almost sounds like a college, how to succeed in college conversation. But let's go to Washington, D.C. What happened there?
Well, and I think it's important for me to let you know that it wasn't all smooth sailing. Right. I went to D.C. in part because I'd gotten through a year of this curriculum, which was exactly what I wanted to do, but my grades were not great. And so when I had an opportunity to get a job, I actually left my graduate program about halfway through and used the opportunity to understand the value of everything that I had learned. Going straight into a master's degree program after undergrad, you don't really understand the value of your education so far. And so for me, it was sort of this stagnation moment, but that turned into a great transformative opportunity. And so about a year later, one of my marketing professors from undergrad called me up and said, "Hey, you're going to finish that master's degree?" And I said, "I'd already been thinking about it. I'm so glad that you called me." And I was able to finish that program online. But another thing I learned about myself in that moment was that experiential learning was the thing that really drove me. So part of the reason I got distracted in school was because we got to put on this big video game music concert in partnership with the jazz program at Miami. Yeah. We got to work with real live video game music composers. We got to work with students who were also writing jazzified versions of those tunes. And it was the real doing of the performing arts that was really what drew me in. When I got to finish the degree online, I got to actually keep doing that work while I was still studying and being able to apply it at the same time. Cool. So for me, it just became a recognition of the things that I really love, and perhaps why I got introduced and fell in love with music in the first place is because I like that feedback loop of learning and doing at the same time.
Exactly. So tell me about Washington, D.C. and that organization work for. How did that all work out?
Yeah, well, it worked out great. I mean, I still have a great relationship with a lot of the folks at that organization. I worked for them for about 2 years. And since I left the organization, I actually have gone back and volunteered at almost every conference that they've had since then. So it was really a stepping stone for me to understand, what is this field? Who are all the players in the field? And you've got presenters who are people who just make sure that the art gets onto a stage. Then you've got the venues, which are actually the physical locations where those presentations are being made. Then you have all of the creators, which is the artists, but also the agents, the management companies. And then there's this whole group of support organizations around it that they provide grants to artists. They give touring support. You can't really learn about all of that stuff unless you get into it and you see it, right? And I never could have learned about all of it in the way that I have had I not just jumped in and gotten that opportunity at APAP. So that was amazing.
So APAP is an organization which brings all these disparate groups together in a single place, and then you can almost network. Is that what it is?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a membership association for performing arts professionals. So the Association of Performing Arts Professionals, APAP. And they have a national conference / international conference every year in New York City.
All right, cool. All right, so then what happened?
I had the wonderful opportunity to work for a few other arts organizations in Washington, D.C. So I worked for the Washington Ballet for a couple of years, and I got to cut my teeth on fundraising and what that was all about. I got to learn about ballet as an art form, something I've never really understood, but learning about the physicality of it, and, you know, they're athletes on the stage. And at the same time, they can be so muscular and yet so controlled. You know, when they jump and they do a grand jeté, you know, they land with such precision, and it's just incredible the amount of training that goes into that. And it's also an art form, you know.
But it sounds like you get excited, I do too, about hearing specifics about something behind the scenes and understanding, getting exposed to all these cool things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think part of my problem is I do consider myself to be, you know, a dilettante, a jack of all trades, master of none. Getting all of these different disparate experiences for me is just all about learning how everything works together. I'm not the kind of person that wants to be a cog in a wheel. I'm the kind of person that wants to like be part of a group of things happening, and also knowing how all those things work together. So that if, you know, I have to go to a colleague and say, hey, I need marketing support for this fundraising campaign, I can say, well, I need specific marketing support. I know that you need to create graphical elements, so these are the dimensions of that. And I like to be able to co-create with people instead of just saying, hey, help me. Like, I don't know what's going on here.
Well, that's critically important. I mean, you look at like social media, I know that's probably an important part of what you bring to the table, but how that whole experience is and how everything you're talking about, vision and mission and all that, how all those elements align. Even if you're good at graphics, you might not have the bigger picture and tweaking things and making it all work together.
Absolutely.
I don't think that was a question, but anyway. All right, back to Washington.
Sure. So after the Washington Ballet, I got to work.
I was looking for validation. I don't know what that was, but anyway, I thought it was fascinating.
I think you made a good point there.
Thank you. This is about you, though. Okay, back to Washington.
Well, you know, after I worked for the Washington Ballet, I had the opportunity to work for a pops orchestra, which was the first time so far that in my career I'd gotten a chance to work for a music organization. And that really changed how I thought about organizations in the arts in general, because it was a really small organization, not a whole lot of staff, but great opportunity for growth. Right. And while I was in that position, I saw an opportunity to continue to further grow. I've already mentioned that I have a bachelor's degree in music business. I have a master's degree in arts management, and I didn't think that was enough. I talk about mentors who come into my life and say things like, hey, you're going to go back to school. Well, it was a little birdie in the back of my head of my mom jokingly saying after I got my arts management degree, so when are you going to go get your MBA? Well, it was time for me to go get an MBA. I wanted to find a way, again, to do experiential learning while I was working full-time. I actually applied to and got involved in the Georgia Web MBA program, which I actually did it through Kennesaw State University. So I was able to get a Coles College of Business level of MBA program experience online, and it was happening at the same time I was working. As that transitioned, I then went to go work for a theater company because I wanted to find other organizations to work for, new experiences to experience, redundant but true, and also wanted to see what it was like to work for a really big organization. Mm-hmm. So I then had the opportunity to work for Arena Stage, which is probably one of the big regional theater companies in the country. And if you've ever heard of a musical called Dear Evan Hansen, it was created in part by Arena Stage. So they moved it to then off Broadway, then it moved to Broadway. And I think the movie's coming out this year. But it's just really neat to kind of come in the footsteps of such a big organization like that and to get involved. 8 months, 10 months into that, the pandemic hit. And it really turned my life on its head.
Season 5 of Marietta Stories is all about small, hole-in-the-wall restaurants. Well, it turns out franchise owners are small business owners too. And John Sylvie owns the Zaxby's over at 591 South Marietta Parkway. John reached out to me to go to Marietta High School and volunteer to teach the kids about podcasting. I jumped at the chance. I know John. He's a straight-up guy, cares about the community, and he works every day to make it a better place to live. Check out the Zaxby's over at 591 South Marietta Parkway. Tell them Bill Nowicki sent you. It's time to check in with my friends at Johnny Walker Realty. Let's hear from Johnny Walker himself.
You've kind of made it through that small business process into a, mid-size, growing real estate empire.
Oh, I don't know about that. We're not trying to take over the world. We just want to be able to do a little business in Marietta and Cobb County and the surrounding areas, and we have great agents that work with us, and if it wasn't for them, none of this would have been possible.
Let's hear from one of their agents, Patty Kendrick.
What made you decide to come over to Johnny Walker Realty?
It was just a good fit. A lot of these people worked with me in the past. We're all old Marietta folks and support each other, and that's about it.
What do you love about Marietta?
Oh, I've lived in Marietta my whole life.
So you don't know anything?
I don't know anything else.
Well,
I guess all the love and support that everyone gives each other.
If you're going to buy or sell a house, check out Johnny Walker Realty. That's JohnnyWalkerRealty.com. They're at 600 Kennesaw Avenue, Suite 200. Give them a call, 678-626-0403.
What ended up happening is Arena Stage, like many performing arts organizations, had to cut significant portions of their staff. And I was one of those cuts. All I could think of was, I've loved my time in DC. I've met so many great friends. I've had such a great time up here. We can't see each other. What should I do while I have nothing to do? And I didn't have nothing to do because I was still doing my MBA program online. But I thought, well, if I'm doing it online, and yet it's a program in Georgia, why don't I go back home? So I called up my parents who still live in Marietta, and I said, I need to come home. And they said, sure. So I was really thankful to them. They've supported me incredibly my entire life. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't have been able to do any of the things that I've been able to do in my life without their support. But one of the things that they really did for me is they gave me a place to be in Georgia with them, with family, during a huge health crisis. And it was so wonderful to be able to know that they were safe and to also be safe with them so that I could keep working on the things that I was doing. And I'd always had this hope that I could come back to Marietta in some way, shape, or form to be able to be part of this community again. The end of the story is now I'm running a nonprofit symphony in Marietta. So
how did that whole thing come about? You're still a young guy.
Some of the artistic experiences that I've had over my lifetime, I've kept in touch with some of my mentors. And one of them is a guy named Brian Black. He was the director of music at First United Methodist Church in Marietta. And now he works for North Avenue Presbyterian Church in Atlanta. But he was my youth choir director growing up. And also one of my fraternity brothers now, he encouraged me to get involved in an organization called Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia. It's a men's music fraternity. So he and I have kept in touch for many years. I was helping my mom out with her business last summer. She was sewing masks for the pandemic and selling them at the Marietta Artisan Market. Mm-hmm. And so I was at the Sew Dreams Come True booth helping out with some masks. Brian comes up and says, hey, there's some great folks over at the Georgia Symphony who I'm sure could use your help while you've got some free time. And I had the opportunity to meet with the board chair at the time, Bob Bonstein, former executive director, Susan Stensland. And as I sat there and I learned about this organization that they had stewarded for many, many years, Susan spent 15 years running this organization. And Bob also put many, many years of energy into this organization. I just couldn't help but be in awe of what they were doing in my hometown. I never expected an organization to be doing so much, to be serving the community so well, and to be an arts organization in Marietta, in Cobb County. I always thought that if I were to get involved with an arts organization here, it would have to be inside the perimeter. I lit up. I just didn't know what could possibly happen. And I started out volunteering with the organization and just helping them. Susan had mentioned that she was retiring soon and said she needed some help getting things in order. Then in the same breath, I heard them kind of say, we have this executive director search happening. Then I reached out to the music director, Timothy Verville, who's still with the organization, and another person who's on the executive search committee. I had a meeting with them. And through that meeting, they offered me the opportunity to apply for the position. I got to know the organization for a few months as a volunteer. Then they asked me to help out with some fundraising things while I also was in the running for this position. It was one of those kind of serendipitous things that happens when everything lines up and everything should be the way it is. I still wake up some mornings and I'm like, I'm the executive director of the Georgia Symphony. How is this possible?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the Georgia Symphony.
The Georgia Symphony was founded in 1951 by some folks who were part of something called the Marietta Music Club. There's this thing called like the League of Music Clubs or something like that. It was really popular for groups of people to come together and to enjoy music together, very much in the way that like Kiwanis and Rotary have different things that they support. The League or the music club's mandate was to basically put on performances. And so I think the year that the symphony was founded, they had gotten like an Australian singer or Australian pianist to come in and perform at like West Side Elementary School. It's the wildest thing. But they were just getting together and finding ways to appreciate music, to go to performances. And then I think someone just said, you know what? Why don't we have our own symphony? Mm-hmm. Betty Shipman Bennett was the first conductor of the Georgia Symphony. It was at the time called the Marietta Community Symphony. And then it had several other names. Most recently, before we changed the name in 2012, I think it was, we were called the Cobb Symphony Orchestra. Mm-hmm. But over time, the scope and reach has grown and grown and grown. And we're this really interesting organization because we say we're the Georgia Symphony, but we're actually a symphony orchestra, a jazz group, a chorus, and then a whole segment of youth orchestras. And we've just renamed the Georgia Youth Symphony orchestras to plural because we realized there are 13 different groups performing with the Georgia Youth Symphony orchestras. There's, I believe, 5 orchestras proper, but then there's a flute choir, a clarinet choir, percussion, jazz, 2 honors groups of brass players, and then string players. We have it all. Oh, and then there's a chorus too. We are really serving the community in this area in a really outsized way. I was looking through lists of zip codes recently to try to figure out how many different areas we're in. I know that our youth orchestra has served students from 17 different counties. I know that we've gotten people to come to our live performances for our orchestra and jazz groups and chorus from also a huge segment of the population of the state. But we're still here. We're still headquartered here in Marietta and in Cobb County. And this is our initial community. This is where we will always, we're never going to leave Marietta. I think we're always going to serve Marietta and then some.
Right. I want to talk about that, but where's the main venue you guys perform at?
So we are in residence at the Marietta Performing Arts Center at Marietta High School, which was built, in 2014. Yeah, and actually our offices were there for many years as well. Much to my amazement, Marietta's fine arts faculty, it continues to grow. They built an orchestra program over the last, 5 years or something like that, where they started, I believe, with 6th grade and then kept adding grades. And now they have an orchestra program at the high school as well. And just reconfiguring and making sure they have enough faculty spaces over there gave us an opportunity to get our own office for the first time. And that's where we're having this conversation right now. But we perform at the Marietta Performing Arts Center, most of our orchestra concerts. Then we also have a concert every year at the Bailey Performance Center at Kennesaw State University. We've had a long-standing relationship with the School of Music there and with the facilities there. So those are definitely our 2 main places. We also, all of our jazz shows happen at the Strand. They'll be coming up this spring, so I hope you'll come and grab a drink and enjoy some jazz.
Great. It's obvious we have this great organization already, but I'm sure you have some ideas and some things you want to do. Where are you heading?
Where are we heading? One thing I haven't mentioned, and while we have these 13 ensembles in our youth symphony, it turns out we're actually the biggest youth symphony orchestra program in the Southeast. In the South, really. And we did some research a couple of years ago as an organization and found out that we are probably in the top 10 by size in the country. So one of our goals is to grow that program until we can say that we're number one. And I think we only have to grow it by about somewhere between 200 and 250 students. So that is definitely something that is big on our radar, because as we say that we're the Georgia Symphony Orchestra and the Georgia Youth Symphony Orchestra, I think we really do want to be Georgia's symphony. We want to be all over the state, serving as many people as we can. We also have this great program that's going to be sort of a downward extension of our Youth Symphony Orchestra program, but it's been the brainchild of one of our board members, Todd Youngblood, who saw an opportunity for us to serve kids in underserved communities. There's over 100 schools in Georgia that actually don't even have music education at all at the schools. And so we have this program that we're piloting this fall at Park Street Elementary School called Music Works. And the idea is that 3rd through 5th graders can start to get a music education even at schools where they can't hire music faculty. So maybe a physical education teacher can facilitate this online learning curriculum for students during the school day, or another paraprofessional or a substitute teacher, someone like that, to add in music education where maybe there aren't funds to do that. And I think it's important to say there is a music teacher at Park Street Elementary School. We're just doing a pilot in our community to kind of get things started.
Well, it sounds like you're back in your days where you're trying to get that guitar player connected with different things. I mean, similar thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just want to find ways to keep building this community and building the communities in Georgia, because unfortunately, Georgia is actually 49th out of 50 states in terms of arts funding from the state. It's really our job as nonprofit organizations and community building organizations in the arts to try and outsize what that funding deficit looks like and make strides in our own communities to change that. But I also think music works in the long run. When we see the power of music, getting that in the schools is so important. We hope it will serve an advocacy purpose over time to be able to grow the funding for the arts in our state, which I love our state.
Yeah, me too. And growing up, I started playing the trumpet when I was in 4th grade, but you learn so many skills, math skills, all these things, and it connects disparate parts of your brain, like you were talking about playing in an ensemble. You can't be the loudest person. You have to be able to blend and all those things. You learn those skills as a child, and I used them in management. How do we come together as a team to put out the best product? I think music is super important. Again, not a question.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me.
Yeah. Well, I heard Sheila Hensley called it STEAM instead of STEM. Why not add arts?
Right. And well, it's the creative aspect of those things. I think a lot of times when you talk about, I won't mention the name of this teacher because she was a great teacher. I just didn't get it. But I remember being at Marietta High School, taking a calculus course, and at one point I was just so lost. Like, I'd been pretty good at math up until that point, but once I hit calculus, it just got too theoretical for me. And I remember at one point I was pretty lost, and the teacher had just explained something to us, and I said, what do you use that for? And she said, well, you can use it to calculate the how much volume of water flows through a pipe. And I was like, well, that does not seem like something I want my career to be involved in. No harm meant towards the civil engineers because they keep our world running. But to find ways to inject creativity into math education, into science education and things like that is critical, because if you don't have that creative aspect into it, you're learning theoretical concepts sort of in a bubble. You're not learning it in ways that could be practically applied. So how cool would it be if, you could do something where throw a note from a synthesizer into a calculus equation and see what is the derivative of a middle C and understand the relationship between spatial things like music and sound and visuals in educational aspects for engineering and math and things like that. I had considered becoming an architect if I hadn't gone into music. But as an adult now, I think I might have liked to go into advertising. All of those different kinds of things, they do dovetail with each other, and there's opportunities there.
Yeah, let's talk about like your typical day. And you've only been in job a few weeks, but you had that past experience. Talk about like your typical day, what you're focused on, because there's so many things pulling you in a million different directions.
Yeah, well, when you're running an organization that has such a small staff complement, like for our first time ever, we have a third full-time staff member. And when you have such a big organization that's trying to achieve so much, so many ensembles, a big youth orchestra program, we do have a bunch of contractors who are involved with us. We've got ensemble directors and musicians and all kinds of folks like that. It's trying to figure out where you take your first bite, really, every day. And so, we are trying to launch our 71st season right now. We've already communicated some of our programming to folks, but, we've got to make sure that the ticket printer has ticket stubs that are working with the new ticketing system we just got. We have to make sure that all of our marketing messages are going out and with clear information that help support our ticket sales and our attendance. And that we're continuing to develop those relationships with our patrons and donors and all kinds of things. So when I sort of sit down every day at my desk, the first thing I do is I open up my email and I go, oh, okay. It's not so much about putting out fires as it's trying to figure out what's the most important thing. Because at the end of the day, as a small organization, trying to provide so much value to the community, we just have to make sure that the ball keeps rolling and that we are saying thank you to the folks who help us live. Also making sure that people feel comfortable and valuable and part of what it is that we're doing. A lot of what I've been doing recently has been on the phone with AT&T trying to get them to get our internet set up. So hopefully that'll happen before the season starts. You never know what you might have to handle on any given day. We have this new office space, which is wonderful. We had to just set up the office space in the last few weeks. But looking towards the future, it's how can we start making those incremental gains in our youth symphony orchestra program? How can we invite more audiences to our performances and also make sure they feel safe and that they have a great opportunity? I think we're going to actually launch probably some form of live streaming this year, not contemporaneous live streaming, but some kind of streamed content, which is something we learned a lot about in the pandemic. We did a lot of great recorded videos of our different ensemble musicians outside in ways that allowed us to highlight the areas in Marietta. In the square park, Glover Park on the square, like we had our harp player performing Lady Gaga's Bad Romance on the harp one time. How can we be more visible? How can we do more good for this community? And how can we make an experience that's enjoyable for people of all ages?
Yeah, so how do people get involved and help out? What's the different options there?
Well, we do need volunteers always. There's some information about volunteering on our website. It's georgiasymphony.org, or you can search Georgia Symphony Orchestra on your favorite web browser. We also are always looking for new folks to join our board of directors. We've got an incredible group of people who have really dedicated a lot of volunteer hours, time, energy towards the work that we do. And, we are always looking for new, interesting perspectives, people from different age groups, people of different demographics to join us so that we can make sure that our community is represented on our board and that we are serving the community effectively through our board members. We always appreciate the financial support of folks in the community, and donors really make up the lifeblood of what we're able to do. As an organization that has an outsized mission, our volunteers and donors have really allowed us to become an organization 3 times the size that we normally would be with only a small staff complement. So if you're a donor already to the Georgia Symphony Orchestra or a volunteer, I just want to say thank you, and I can't wait to meet you.
Yeah. And how about businesses? And have you reached out to them? Is that something you spend your time doing too?
Well, we are definitely looking for more partnerships and supportive businesses in the area. I do want to say thank you to W.D. Little Mortgage, who sponsored our virtual to center stage talent competition a few months ago. That was just really wonderful to have the support of that organization and their owner, Mary Ansley Sutherland. We are always looking for new sponsorships and sponsor opportunities. We would love to have every one of our concerts sponsored by a local company and have them bring a bunch of folks from their organization along to see the performances and as a place to do business. I think we are very committed to economic impact in Marietta as well. So any opportunities to partner with local businesses is just amazing.
Yeah, it's so cool getting back after the pandemic. Went to the square for the concert last month, and it was so cool. People were like so jazzed just to hear music again and be around other people, and people were dancing and having a good old time. But yeah, I'm super excited. Here comes a train. You're not far from the train.
We aren't far from the train tracks, but it wouldn't be Marietta without that train sound.
That's true. Well, welcome back to Marietta. I wish you the best of luck. We'll check in periodically, see how you're doing. Best of luck in the future, and go to the website, volunteer, and you're on Instagram, all that kind of good stuff too, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You can find us on any social media. It's at Georgia Symphony, and our website is georgiasymphony.org.
Very good. Well, thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you and spending time with you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you to Taylor Rambo, the Georgia Symphony. Go to georgiasymphony.org to learn more. This is Bill Nowicki saying thank you for listening to Marietta Stories podcast. Tell a couple friends about the show. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please support our businesses and go to visit MariettaGA.com.